Now coming back to the text, we are just in the third paragraph. I spent a little time explaining Heraclitus because he really seems to have influenced the West immensely on this philosophy of war, that he is the father of all things, etc. Then I continue the reading. From a clash of material or other forces, everything in this world, if not the world itself, seems to be born. By a struggle of forces, tendencies, principles, beings, it seems to proceed, ever creating new things, ever destroying the old, marching one knows not very well whither. To a final destruction, say some. In an unending series of vain cycles, say others. In progressive cycles is the most optimistic conclusion, leading through whatever trouble and apparent confusion towards a higher and higher approximation to some divine apocalypse. So here, war being the father of all things, so we do understand that there is this tremendous tendency of the struggle of forces, tendencies, principles. But what is the end of all this? Are we going to fight each other eternally? Well, some people say, well, yes, we will destroy each other. That is the climax, end of the world. That this world, there will be a third nuclear war and a fourth one will not be there. The third one, the world would be smashed to smithereens, and that's the end. That is, some people say that. Well, some people will say, well, we go on fighting, more fighting, less fighting, but it's a vain, endless cycles. Humanity will never learn from its destruction. But there is another school of thought which says, no, we are going to progress, and it is going to be that we are going towards an evolutionary higher consciousness. This is not the end of human consciousness, and therefore the wars will not continue. There is going to be a new consciousness, and as somebody was just now asking me, that if in war, there are two parties or four parties, some people may have a higher consciousness, some others a lower consciousness, then what will this continue? Well, as we said, the very fact that two people have come to the war table or to the war field itself shows that they are in the lower consciousness. Some, 1.5 inch higher and the other 1.5 inch lower, it hardly matters. What it means is, unless humanity goes beyond mind or the mental consciousness, humanity as a whole. So it's not just that if in India, there are two parties which are very good and we say, oh, we have become spiritual parties of India. It doesn't work. So that is why now we know why Aurobindo all the time insisted on the human unity, a change of consciousness on the human level. Not on small groups of Aurobindonians or Ashramites or followers of this guru or that guru. It doesn't help. So there's got to be an upliftment of the whole of human consciousness. And that perhaps will come about by a wave of the new consciousness. Is not going to trigger in a few pockets. Well, a few pockets may be exemplary. A few individuals here and there could follow this higher consciousness, reach higher levels of consciousness, and they may kind of make the path easier. But until and unless the whole of humanity, the whole means, don't take it as literally every human being living. The whole of humanity means that human consciousness which is effective, which is influential, which is the avant-garde. So that kind of a humanity, if it comes higher into a spiritual consciousness, then we could come to a kind of a no-war situation. Until then, I'm afraid this kind of self-destruction and all this will go, but Aurobindo would hold that this is not the end. There is a higher end for this world, a higher evolution. However that may be, This is certain that there is not only no construction here without destruction, no harmony except by a poise of contending forces, one out of many actual and potential discords, but also no continued existence of life except by a constant self-feeding and devouring of other life. So now Sri Aurobindo is getting on to the basic level. Look at nature also. I mean, everywhere there is devouring of life, killing of each other, animals, animals killing each other. And so this has become a kind of an accepted law of this life upon earth. So not only the human beings, but the animals are also having the same law of existence. In fact, our very bodily life is a constant dying and being reborn. The body itself is a beleaguered city attacked by assailing, protected by defending forces whose business is to devour each other, and this is only a type of all our existence. So he gives the example of our own body. When we say the viral attacks us, there's a new viral that comes and attacks. Then in the body, there's a defensive method. The body has its own different ways. So this attack and defense is constantly happening even in our body. We take some food today, there's an attack on our stomach because maybe some things are not palatable, some things are not good for the stomach, and the stomach defends itself, or sometimes when it cannot defend, it throws it out. So he says everywhere the struggle and strife is common, right from our body to the animal world to the human world. This is the type of all our existence. The command seems to have gone out from the beginning, thou shalt not conquer except by battle with thy fellows and thy surroundings. Thou shalt not even live except by battle and struggle and by absorbing into thyself other life. The first law of this world that I made is creation and preservation by destruction. So that seems to be the basic law of this world. Creation and preservation by destruction. So we may not like it, but this is the first law, as he calls it, this is the first law of the world. So of course, we will see towards the end how Sri Aurobindo takes us beyond. But it's important to understand why Sri Aurobindo is spending so much time explaining this is that unless and until we accept this factor and not live in a kind of an illusionary non-violent situation that we are all goody-goody and Indians are supposed to be spiritual people and we practice non-violence, it doesn't work. Non-violence has led to greatest violence in India. What is supposed to be a non-violent country has become the most violent country upon the face of the earth. So it is harmful to close our eyes to reality. So Sri Aurobindo is that pragmatic yogin who says, let's see what the problem is. And seeing the problem is already half the solution of the problem. But if you are ostrich like we say, no, our country is ancient country, Vedic country, we are not violent people. That's the foolishest thing we can do, to close our eyes to our own reality. So in fact, that was what was done during this independence movement. Presenting ourselves to be non-violent people. We have seen that suppression has brought out the greatest oppressiveness in our country. We are killing each other, all the terrorism, all the Naxalites, all the LTTs, everything. So he says, let us be realistic and not just be idealistic. And that is where Sri Aurobindo is brilliant, because he does not fight shy of calling a spade a spade. Once he realizes the disease, then he goes deeper into the cure. Otherwise, if you never accept the disease, you will never find the cure. So this is the attitude of Sri Aurobindo. Let's find out what are the laws of this world. War is one of them. So, if you want to go beyond war, we can. How? You will find out. But just to say, no, we are not warring at all, we are a peaceful country, is rubbish. Ancient thought accepted this starting point so far as it could see it by a scrutiny of the universe. The old Upanishadics saw it very clearly and phrased it with an uncompromising thoroughness which will have nothing to do with any honeyed glosses or optimistic scuttlings of the truth. So you see, that's something nice to know. There is only somewhere that we have gone off the track, but originally in our Vedanta, we did accept this reality of the world. And he says the Upanishadic saw it and expressed it blatantly without any honeyed gloss. You see a beautiful term, honeyed gloss, not trying to close your eyes and say, all is well with our country, we are, religious people and all that. This is, turning your face away from truth. But they did not. They, on the contrary, said, hunger, that is death, they said, is a creator and master of this world. And they figured vital existence in the image of the horse of the sacrifice. Matter, they described by a name which means ordinarily food. And they said, we call it food because it is devoured and devours creatures. The eater is eaten. This is the formula of the material world. This is the famous Upanishadic phrase, the eater eating is eaten. So this is the same law as war. The eater eating is eaten. I take some food. I am the eater. I have eaten the food. But then the food eats me up. Because you see, it goes into my body. It takes energy to digest. So it is drawing energy, it is drawing blood, and then sometimes there's a virus, there's infection in the food, and that causes illness. And that really disturbs the whole harmony of my body. So I think that I'm going to live by this food that I'm taking, but we don't realize that food also is taking energy from you, that is also taking all the concentration from you, is all the blood flow from you, and there's a wear and tear. If you take a heavy food, what's happening? The body is struggling harder to digest that food. So what's happening? It is a strain on the body. So my body is getting wear and tear because of the food that I've taken. It's a very, very simple example we are giving. So the eater eating is eaten. So now go on the vital level, emotional level, the same thing. I think I have an attachment with this person, that I'm dominating this person. But when you think that you have this attachment and the domination, that person's demands are also there. And you're trying to fulfill those demands, you're doing extra work, you're doing extra money, earning extra money to fulfill the needs of the family, and there's a cycle of your own being eaten away. So emotionally you are drained because you think you love somebody, but the love also demands on you. It cannot be one-way traffic love. The lover also demands on you. So trying to fulfill those demands, you are again emotionally exhausted. So vitally again, the same principle applies. So what the Upanishads have said is very much in the same line of the war as the father of everything. So Sri Aurobindo says, our Upanishads recognize this truth, and they put it very bluntly. Even Heraclitus couldn't have put it so bluntly. And then coming to the modern times, as the Darwinians rediscovered, when they laid it down that the struggle for life is a law of evolutionary existence. So Darwin also says the same thing. Struggle for life. Survival of the fittest. So what are you trying to do? Destroying others so that you may remain alive. Is war. And the fittest tries to really see that there is nobody around him, and for that he is demolishing all life around it. So it's the same law. And then modern science has only rephrased the old truth that had already been expressed in much more forcible, wide and accurate formulas by the apothegm of Heraclitus and the figures employed by the Upanishads. So now in the scientific field also, we have to see how this is applicable. But it says, the science also says the same thing, that there is constant destruction and there is a constant creation. There is no single staticity anywhere of only progressive creation. Well, here we end with Heraclitus, and Sri Aurobindo tells us how we have the same thought in Upanishads, same thought in Darwin, the same thought in modern science. There's a whole trend of the same thought. Now coming to modern times, Nietzsche's insistence upon war as an aspect of life and the ideal man as a warrior, the camel man he may be to begin with, and the child man hereafter, but the lion man he must become in the middle if he is to attain his perfection. These now much decried theories of Nietzsche have, however much we may differ from many of the moral and practical conclusions he drew from them, their undeniable justification and recall us to a truth we like to hide out of sight. Now here, I'd like to refer to a small passage because we must again know this Nietzschean thought. You see, Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, a great philosopher from 1844 to 1900, he brought in this new theory, or this his not theory but his own philosophy, what he called the will to power. Because Sri Aurobindo does mention this later, so I'm just, as I'm on the spot, I'm telling you. As Heraclitus has talked about war as the father of all things, now Nietzsche believes that the cardinal concept of Nietzsche is the will to power. Please remember the same word power that Sri Aurobindo used for Heraclitus is being used by Nietzsche now. He says the whole motivation of life is the will to power. Now what do we understand? He says this is the central piece of a vast philosophical panorama. To its working out he devoted the greater part of the last 4 years of his active life. He presents it as a principle discernible in all nature, in accordance with which a self or center of power expands beyond its own boundaries, asserts itself over another, and strives to appropriate it. You see, this is the principle. Now, what is this? Now, if we take up this sentence, now a center of power expands beyond its own boundaries. Now, for example, there is a company, IT company. So they have a group of 5-7 people. Now they say, we would like to be bigger, richer, more powerful. So what do they do? They expand beyond their own boundaries. If their work was this much, they expand. They go beyond that. So that is the will to power, means will to, as the word is, asserts itself over another. Now by expanding, what are you doing? You are trying to step into the field of another IT company, and you become so very powerful that one day you grab it and you appropriate it, you buy it. So this is a simple sentence, but we can apply that to all our own human existence. We are constantly having the will to power, means will to expand, to grow, to improve. And by that growth and expansion, what am I getting? A kind of a power. Power of money, power of name, power of position, all kinds of power. So none of us, we are kids, we have become adults. When we take into a job, I want a 10,000 rupees, then a 20,000 rupees, then a 30,000. There's this expansion. This expansion is what is called the power. The power in every situation. So he would say here, the will to power is the agency whereby man, the weakest, cleverest being, becomes master of the earth, yet it is not identical with life. So humanity too is trying to take power over earth, or gain power over earth, over this entire animal kingdom and nature, by destroying it, sometimes by helping it, by doing this and that. So today man has become the most powerful creature upon earth. How has he become? By self-asserting himself upon nature. So like this he keeps expanding, explaining. He says, We find that the will to power is involved in every political activity, in the sciences as well. It colors the whole gamut of our feelings and emotions and is present in every social and familial context. In fact, it is hard to think of a mundane situation in which it is not present. A quarrel between two friends about an ascertainable fact, the contest inherent in every erotic encounter and in the sex act itself, the functions of the teacher, the preacher, the boss, the advisor are unthinkable without involving the exercise of power, but also that of the benefactor and alms giver of every kind, the man who loves to surprise, who gladly forgives, the superior conversationalist, etc. So now he says every little thing, the teacher trying to overpower the student, the boss trying to overpower the workers there, and even there's a little argument, you're trying to prove your point is right and the other point is wrong. So Nietzsche is saying this aspect of trying to win our power is there common in our life. Now this will to power is exactly the same thing as we are talking about war. War is a bigger word, it's a simpler word, more applicable and closer to our understanding. But now we see, this one I've taken from edited by Frank Kermode, Nietzsche, J.P. Stern. These are very popular books, which have really come out in the, for each philosopher we have a book like that. So, just a few couple of lines, there's a whole lot of chapter there. But also Nietzsche, most of you will remember, he is known among these Aurobindonian circles for another reason, for his concept of the supermind. In fact, Nietzsche was the first one to have coined the word supermind, or superman, not the supermind, superman. So Aurobindo, in fact, he says, for lack of a better word, he kind of borrows the word from Nietzsche. So the Aurobindonian philosophers would know Nietzsche and Aurobindo with the common name of Superman. And unfortunately, this philosophy of will to power, you see, there could be a philosophical truth in this, and there is, as we see in Aurobindo too. But that was misutilized by Hitler. You see, the will to power that must struggle and dominate over others is the law of existence. If that is the message that we get from Nietzsche, Hitler said, well, I'm going to do that exactly. I'm going to dominate humanity. I'm going to have the power over entire earth. And for that domination and gaining power, I will do what I want. Whatever I can do. So it's a simple philosophy, how it gets twisted. That is why in Aurobindo, when we say that all this is good, all these philosophies may seem good, but they can also be twisted around if and unless we have this higher element of spirituality. All these so-called beautiful laws can be misutilized by man, by a tyrant, by a king, by a politician to suit his own egoistic purposes. So you see, whatever humanity has done till now, they have been misused. All great philosophers have come, but a wrong utilization has taken place because we lack the spiritual consciousness. That is why now the urgency of bringing in a spiritual consciousness upon earth. Otherwise, mind has given us great philosophers. Your Schopenhauer, there is the Nietzsche, there is, we have the Ken Wilber in the modern times, and everybody. Thought is not lacking. There's always a kind of a growth in this thought process. But it will always lead to a kind of a dead end or a misutilization if there is no spiritual goal. So, coming back to the chapter, so this is what Nietzsche also tells us. I have not taken out from there, where Nietzsche would say, there is a progress, but every man has got to be a lion man. Lion man is one who is powerful. We have this element of the power of war, of killing, the instinct to kill. So he says, this is there in every man. Nietzsche says that. And so he says that these principles which have been much decried have a truth, because we have seen that too in Heraclitus too. It is good that we should be reminded of it. Now this is a very important few lines here, because we understand now why Sri Aurobindo is telling us that we must understand and accept these facts of life, because it is good that we should be reminded of it. Of it means reminded of Nietzsche or Heraclitus or other Darwin or any other philosophers, because first, to see it as for every strong soul a tonic effect which saves us from the flabbiness and relaxation encouraged by the too mellifluous philosophic, religious or ethical sentimentalism. So you see, it's a good tonic for, as it says, for a strong soul. You see, a strong soul, a spiritual soul, a great soul like Vivekananda, it really, to see the reality helps them to be away from this sentimentalism. Because most of us are sentimentally, encouraged towards, as it says, too mellifluous philosophic, religious or ethical sentimentalism. We go in the name of God being mercy and God being love and love thy neighbor, and you should not hit thy neighbor, show one cheek to the other person and all that. It's just all this is sentimentalism. This is not the truth of human nature. So to be guided by that is to hide the truth, that there is this instinct. You see, it is important to know that man is not all that angelic man, that there is the devil in him too. Recognize that. And Sri Aurobindo recognized the devil in man. And in Savitri you have umpteen number of lines describing this devil in man. And then he says how to transform this devil, how to reject this devil. But if you say, no, we are all angelic people, then we are asking for trouble. If not today, tomorrow the problem will come up. So the first thing is, let us be conscious of who we are, of what we are, and not be lost into kind of a sentimental talking. He says, that which loves to look upon nature as love and life and beauty and good, but turns away from her grim mask of death, adoring God as Shiva, but refusing to adore him as Rudra. See, that is the whole principle. That the same Shiva is Rudra also. We want to go to Shiva because he is Bholanath, he gives you, all this, what do you call that? He grants your wishes, he gives you all kinds of gifts. He says he's a Bholanath, Shiva is a nice man, a nice God. But forget that Shiva is the same Rudra, the angry personality, the one who can really, put the world into a thunderstorm and really destroy it. So he says we are sentimentally attracted to this Shiva, and for that I should really congratulate the Bengalis who worship as much Lakshmi but more Durga. So to recognize this aspect of Durga, aspect of the goddess, not only Durga, the Kali aspect. You see, you can have the Durga aspect, but there's the Kali aspect. And you see in Bengal there is the Kali temple, man, really is a terrible thing to see that. But that is the thing, God's terrible face. Why should we have all the alankar, all the decorations, all the beautiful flowers and think that God is all merciful? There is the other aspect also. So Sri Aurobindo is saying, do not fight shy of seeing the fullness of the divine. The God is love as well as God is the destroyer. So he says, secondly, because unless we have the honesty and courage to look existence straight in the face, we shall never arrive at any effective solution of its discords and oppositions. That is realistic. If they know that there is this ailment in the body, then you start treating. So if you don't look at it honestly, we can never have a solution to that. And that has been one of the weaknesses of our country, that we have never looked at ourselves honestly. We have always looked at ourselves with this kind of, what it says, honeyed glosses, in the name of all these great ethical teachings and non-violence, and saying we are great people. That's why we are suffering now. At least now let us look at ourselves. What is this country? It's full of violence, full of terrorism, full of insecurity, full of this. Sometimes the Westerners come and say, why do you have all these grills in your windows? They can never imagine that every house in India, the richer, the more the grills, the thicker the grills. So they can't imagine that so-called spiritual country has everywhere a grill in your window. So it's an absolute sense of insecurity. Go to Singapore. My God, the lady can walk in the streets at midnight, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, nothing. Absolute security they have achieved. But we are supposed to be the spiritual country. Where is our security? You may say we are poor. There's the poor and the rich. Yes, there are reasons. But let us accept that we are not angels here. So that is how Sri Aurobindo says, be practical. Then you will get the solution. Next he would say, we must see first what life and the world are. Afterwards, we can all the better set about finding the right way to transform them into what they should be. If this repellent aspect of existence holds in itself some secret of the final harmony, we shall, by ignoring or belittling it, miss that secret, and all our efforts at a solution will fail by fault of our self-indulgent ignoring of the true elements of the problem. He would say, first, see what life and world are, then find a solution, and in finding the solution, sometimes if this repellent aspect of existence, repellent aspect is the war. If this war situation holds in itself some secret of the final harmony, that's a very important phrase. He says, maybe if we look close into this question of the war, or this consciousness of war and the strife, maybe there's a secret hidden in that. Why humanity is taken to war so much? So he says, if you go deep into this war consciousness, you may see a hidden secret there. What is the secret? We will see. Otherwise, we may miss it because we have always chosen to look at the softer side of life, the more unrealistic side of life. So when we go to the west or east, it's not that Singapore is a haven of virtues. Yeah, they have achieved certain virtues, as I was telling you previously, the cleanliness, the security and all that. But they have their own problems. We have our own problems, we have our own virtues. So, the first thing is, be honest, be realistic, look at the face, face to face. Don't flinch. Then I would say, if on the other hand, it is an enemy to be beaten down, trampled on, excised, eliminated, still we gain nothing by underrating its power and hold upon life, or refusing to see how firmly it is rooted in the effective past and the actually operative principles of existence. So this is either way we stand to gain. One is, if we look at this problem of violence closely, we may find a secret there. What is the secret? About our own vital nature. That how the human vital is predominant in our life. Because it is this vital which is asking for strife, disharmony, blood and violence. So we may try to see how to transform the vital, how to change this vital. But if we don't look at this problem at all, we may never transform our vital. It will go on and on without getting transformation. Or the second part is that if we really see that there is something wrong in us, the vital, the evil, the undivine, so we may even by sadhana try to reject it. One is you may transform it, or the other one you may reject it. And if you want to reject your lower impulses, then we will say, come to sadhana, take up yoga. So that is how you can transform and reject. If you don't do that, then we go on perennially what we are doing. One party blaming the other, one party killing the other, one Naxalite killing the other. So all this, what are they showing? What are they telling us? That man needs to transform himself. Unless there is this transformation of consciousness, none of these political parties, none of these philosophies, none of this ethics, none of these religions can help us. In the name of religions we have fought, in the name of ethics we have fought, in the name of nations we have fought. So, on all the possible reasons upon earth we have fought. So ultimately it really is kind of cornering us with the only solution, saying transformation, change of consciousness, upliftment of consciousness. That's the only truth. War and destruction are not only a universal principle of our life here in its purely material aspects, but also of our mental and moral existence. Now this is really important. On the physical level we have seen, war is inevitable. Everywhere, right from our inside body to the animal field, to the nature, everywhere there is war. That is the war on the physical level. But there is war now on the mental and moral existence. This is much more dangerous. And look at Aurobindo very bluntly. It is self-evident that in the actual life of man, intellectual, social, political, moral, we can make no real step forward without a struggle, a battle between what exists and lives, and what seeks to exist and live, and between all that stands behind either. So this is on the mental, moral level. Each time you have a new idea, you see, our human tendency is not just to pronounce a new idea, but we say, that idea is bad, mine is better. Throw away that old system, replace it with mine. So there is a constant battle of ideas. When each company says, my cell phone is better than the other because I've got these extra features. So there is this clash. One thing comes in, the other has to go out. So he says, on every level, a battle between what exists and lives and what seeks to exist and live. So that means there's a battle between the past and the present on every level. So, and between all that stands behind each other. It is impossible, at least as men and things are, to advance, to grow, to fulfill, and still to observe really and utterly that principle of harmlessness which is yet placed before us as the highest and best law of conduct. That principle of harmlessness, the non-violence. So he says it's impossible to really follow. We have had this principle for the last 55 years. Every politician on the counter, in front of the mic, shouts that he is really the greatest follower of the non-violence. But has the country improved? Become more non-violent? Not at all. Less non-violent? No. We have become more non-violent. So Aurobindo, very blunt, he says, nothing can grow, fulfill itself, advance without this war. And this whole ideal of non-violence, he says, it is impossible as we are at present. So it is a kind of a carrot that is kept in front of us saying, no, you must be non-violent. But a carrot which you never reach. Because you can never reach the non-violent stage unless you really change your consciousness. It's no use trying to have this false ideal. Non-violence is a false ideal for the human consciousness at present. Peace is unattainable for the human consciousness as it is at present. So Sri Aurobindo is telling, let us be blunt and really see the reality, and not be garbed in the cloak of non-violence and pretend that we are a non-violent nation. We will use only soul force and never destroy by war or any even defensive employment of physical violence. So this question of satyagraha, this question of Atma Shakti, that we will drive the Britishers out only by our soul force, by satyagraha or by Atma Shakti. Can it be done? Has it been done, first of all? And we, majority of the Indians, we think it is a non-violence that drove the Britishers out. It's a great satyagraha that really paved the way for the Britishers' retreat. That is only a false mesmerism that Indians have got trapped into. It's not non-violence that gave us the freedom. Who said that? It's a party for the sake of its own existence and continuance is whitewashing the Indian mind. But it's not non-violence which gave us. Mother in her vision said, 20 years before the independence came in, she came to Sri Aurobindo and she said, India is free. Sri Aurobindo said, how? She simply said, the way the Britishers came, they will leave. Not because of non-violence or satyagrahas and all the killings and all that. That was an outer shape, and each party requires something to exist by, a name, to an idol, to put a garland upon. So it was decided by the divine destiny that the Britishers came for a specific purpose to our country. Their role was over, it has to go. And their withdrawal was kind of orchestrated by the second war. The Britishers may not agree, may not really approve, may not consent. But it is the second war that really compelled them to withdraw, because they had a greater stake in hand and they had to leave the country. But history and politicians and historians, they whitewash the important events, like what happened with Sri Aurobindo's role. Nobody writes in the Indian freedom movement, except they say the only thing, Aurobindo Ghosh prepared that bomb case and he was put in the Alipur jail. But what about all his principles? What all the work he did? All the writings he gave in the Vande Mataram? Those were the writings that really started the fire in the youngsters in Bengal and in Punjab and somewhat in Gujarat. But our politicians never mention that. Why? Because they want India to be a non-violent, known as a non-violent country. But you see where India is today. It's a shame. So that was not the reality, that we were ever non-violent or that we are even now non-violent. So Sri Aurobindo is saying that all this question of we will use soul force to drive out the Britishers, thousands of people marching and this and that, it's all an external thing that has happened. And sometimes, in fact, I read somewhere, because of the flow of the current of historical events, some people, if you see the waves of the ocean, you throw a kind of a bottle in the waves, a corked bottle, and you see the corked bottle comes up on the wave, at the top of the wave, not because of its own power, but because the wave itself came up and the cork bottle happened to be nearby. It was brought up and people said, oh, look at the cork bottle, how great it is, it's in the top of the world. But it did not become great by its own strength. It came on the top because of the wave of the historical events. That is how some of the figures in India came up on the wave of this revolution that was taking place. In fact, that was founded long back, 100 years back in 1857, by our great heroes, young people of Punjab. All that is forgotten. So we always remember the end, the one who signed the pact. But what about all those people who went before him? And Sri Aurobindo was one of those glorious figures who right from the age of 21 gave his life for 13 years and prepared. You see, a war, first of all, if you remember the recent incident 3 years back when America went to war with Iraq, first there was a bombing of ideas into the media. Then the actual bombing followed. So this is the psychology, the mind has to be prepared. So the world accepts Iraq is a criminal, so let's bomb them. So US is right. So this is the bombing of ideas. There's a psychological preparation. So in India, Sri Aurobindo made this psychological preparation. The waves of revolution that were caught on from Bengal, those waves spread into the whole country. And the center of the wave was somebody called Aurobindo Ghosh there. But today we forget them. So that is why we have to correct that history. We don't know when it will be corrected, because it's not in the interest of the politicians to give us the true image, because they cannot survive without that kind of a false image on which they have to put a garland once a year. So he says, good. Though until soul force is effective, the Asuric force in men and nations tramples down, breaks, slaughters, burns, pollutes, as we see it today. But then at its ease and unhindered, you have perhaps caused as much destruction of life by your abstinence as others by resort to violence. Still, you have set up an ideal, which may someday and at any rate ought to lead up to better things. So here is very strong. He says, you have perhaps caused as much destruction of life by your abstinence as others by resort to violence. So-called Satyagraha movements, how many thousands of people were not killed in India? And they were said to be great heroes, giving up your life for the country. But those great young Sardars of Punjab and Calcutta, they also gave up their life, but heroically, not like cowards. They fought with the British, as he said, is the enemy to be beaten down, trampled down, excised, eliminated? We have to do that. But not by giving up one's life, as if it has no value. So he says, either way there was violence, either way there were deaths. And perhaps there are more deaths in the non-violence than if they were really violent there would have been. So you see, Punjab suffered all those great, I don't want to mention names, but all of you know history. People were surrounded in a compound and thousands of people just bulleted down. So that was violence. But did the non-violence movement stop that? Nothing. So is Sri Aurobindo saying, all this Asuric force in men and nations trampled down. So you say, I won't lift my finger, my guns. Let the Britishers kill, Jallianwala Bagh and everybody and keep killing. But no, I will not lift anything. So what Sri Aurobindo is telling is, by not lifting the weapon, if Arjuna does not lift the weapon of Gandiva, Duryodhan will win the war. And if Duryodhan wins, what happens? The whole of future Bharat his history is done for. So that's what we have done during the so-called Kurukshetra of the Indian independence. We have all put our Gandiva down and said, no, let the Britishers beat us, do whatever it is. We are a great sacrificing nature. By that sacrifice, what have we done? We have not driven the Britishers out, they went away. But leaving behind an onslaught of violence, a reaction of violence. And today, it is that is happening. If we had been, as Sri Aurobindo says, the Gita's Kshatriyas fought back the Britishers, perhaps that violence would have been wiped away and today we would have been a better country, a quieter country, a non-violent country today, because we would have really faced, like Arjuna, the war of Kurukshetra would have taken place. Thousands of people, both sides would have died in either way, violence or non-violence, but at least there would have been a greater stability and not this false idealism that we are a non-violent country. So that is, Sri Aurobindo saying, that is what the Asuric force in men and nations tramples down. So this is one philosophy that Sri Aurobindo does not really agree, because he is writing about the Kurukshetra and he is following the Lord Krishna, his advice to Arjuna. Just arise and fight, but with this new understanding. So he says, but even soul force, when it is effective, destroys. Only those who have used it with eyes open, know how much more terrible and destructive it is than the sword and the cannon. And only those who do not limit their view to the act and its immediate results can see how tremendous are its after effects, how much is eventually destroyed, and with that much all the life that depended on it and fed upon it. Evil cannot perish without the destruction of much that lives by the evil. And it is no less destruction, even if you personally are saved the pain of a sensational act of violence. That is something again to be understood. That this evil or this hatred, this question of, the destruction by evil, you cannot suppress it just because externally there's no bullet shot that we have seen during the Satyagraha movement. We think that we have won it because by our soul force we have opposed the Britishers. You see, there have been only 10 people who have died instead of, if there were bullets, there would have been 2,000 people dead. But then Sri Aurobindo is telling that personally, even if there's no pain, if you personally are saved the pain of a sensational act of violence, but evil is not destroyed, that evil of violence, of hatred, all these things will continue. And that is the suppressed evil of violence that has erupted after the so-called freedom movement of the country. During the movement of the country, Satyagraha, no killing, no blood, no pain. But you have only this soul force psychology, this soul force forces become more violent. And that is precisely why India is more violent than it was before the independence. There it was freedom struggle, but it's not a violent country. Today there's violence everywhere. I mean, just this village man, who's I'm living in Kuchukupam, that man threatens me. So what is the rule of the law here? Violence. Emotional violence, physical violence. I mean, this was never the case before India, before the freedom of India. So today this violence and gundagiri have become part of our existence, and we have accepted to be the violence. And all this because long back, 57 years back, 60 years back exactly, or about, we suppressed all these feelings. If our violence and hatred against the British was brought out openly, we would have had a heroic gain back and not discovered this thing. We are begging the country, oh Britishers, please, hamara ghar chhod ke jao, mera ghar hai. We are not supposed to be the beggars. So Sri Aurobindo inspired in the Bande Mataram by this. Don't beg the Britishers. This is our Swarajya, is my birthright. So this was the Gita Yogin. And that is what I admire in Sri Aurobindo. And unfortunately, we do not know this Gita Yogin who fought for the independence of the country. And when he fought the war, there are many Arjunas who came to fight along with him. Mother says there are special souls who came down to work for this freedom of the country and work with Sri Aurobindo. So Sri Aurobindo worked through many Arjunas to get back this victory. And once he fought, the victory was assured. Mother saw it long back. But in the last 20 years, unfortunately, a different wave came, a different personality came, different personnel came, and they took the cream out of the cake, and they became the heroes. But that was again, they did it or not did it, we would have got exactly in 22 years, because Mother saw it. And she said 15th of August had to be the date, 47 or 50 or 47, 48. And also I believe if 1950 Sri Aurobindo were to withdraw, I'm dead sure it had to be before 1950. Because as Sri Aurobindo writes in his message of 1947, it's a gift of the providence to Sri Aurobindo. It's a divine providence which gifted Sri Aurobindo because he worked for the independence of the country. It brought to Sri Aurobindo a birthday gift. The divine brought Sri Aurobindo the birthday gift for the freedom of the country. So Mother in one of her messages says, 15th of August 1947 is not important for the freedom of the country. First, it is important because it's the birthday of Sri Aurobindo. So she tells the Aurobindonians, first celebrate his birthday. Because of him and his work, that the divine gave back to us as a country on his birthday. So you see, these are the spiritual inner secrets we do not know. So only some know. Others have blindly followed. Even Aurobindonians, knowing all that, says, no. So and so, so and so, so and so. But I thought this is a paragraph that should set aright our thinking. And whatever we have believed, we must now unbelieve and find out the new truth of our own freedom, of our own country. Because this is what the Kurukshetra is all about. So if Sri Aurobindo did not believe in the Kurukshetra, he would not have gotten into the Kurukshetra or the freedom of the country. Yeah, so we leave that paragraph and we will proceed. I mean, he is becoming more and more powerful with each paragraph, and so you can see the tremendous power in this chapter. That's why I said in the beginning that this is not a chapter that belongs to essays on the Gita. It was an inspired chapter which he wrote because of a new philosophy believed. Right, we will stop there.